the chair of IOD, Ndugu Nelson Kuria, the CEO, Meshach, the members of the Institute of Directors, the participants in this conference, good afternoon. Like you heard, my name is Simon Indimuli. Now, when you serve in the board of a state corporation in Kenya, at times, immediately you are appointed, one foot is at committee, and every day the one in the committee is pulling the other one. And so it's a very interesting sector to serve in, and I'm so happy that the leadership of the Institute deemed it fit to welcome me to come to this conference. I was told to talk about the public sector governance and the lessons and insights from the implementation of Mwongozo. Mwongozo is a code of governance. It's a uniform code, and it was actually developed through an initiative. The President of the Republic of Kenya appointed a task force to very deliberately look into governance issues bedeviling state corporations in Kenya. That was in 2013. And that team then did recommend that there should be deliberate action by government to reform state corporations. And one of the reform initiatives that was recommended by that team was the need to have a uniform code of governance for state corporations. Now, one of the pillars of that team, I was a joint secretary in 2013 to that presidential task force, but the pillar on ethics and governance was Nelson Kuria. Nelson, just stand up. We need to appreciate this guy. Actually, the brains behind the code of governance is Nelson Kuria. And it was issued as a code, but then to put some force of law for implementation of that code, the president issued it through an executive order. And the president is given powers under Section 7 of the State Corporations Act to give directives to boards of state corporations, and they are required to implement. So that is what happened. And because of that, the courts have done us well. There are 6 court judgments which have actually the most recent in July last year. The Employment and Labor Relations Court very, very explicitly declared that Mwongozo is part of Kenya's jurisprudence. So anybody not implementing Mwongozo in a state corporation is offending the law. So that is what Mwongozo is, and it is there to provide specific transparency and disclosure, ethical leadership and integrity, accountability and internal control, and compliance, ensuring that there's full compliance to laws. Now, some of the issues, especially when it comes to reporting, where state corporations were before 2015, most state corporations concentrated mainly on financial reporting. But through Mwongozo, you have now a requirement as a board, and most boards are adhering to that. They are now doing integrated reporting, where issues to do with financials are there, issues to do with the management, and you have to give a management commentary on issues of governance that have come to the institution, how the institution has managed them, and the institutional mechanism that you have put in place as a board to ensure that there is proper management in an institution. There are issues of governance reports. We have done very poorly. We were supposed to be doing governance audits. We are at the tail end now. I'm very sure that next week we shall have the governance auditors who have passed exams, attended lessons, passed exams. They have been vetted by government. 533 of them should be gazetted next week. So then we shall have those governance reports. Issues of environment, climate change, sustainability, now all of them are there. The pillars of Mwongozo, if you go there, emphasis on the people. People, we are talking about the citizenry, the persons that are supposed to be entitled to the services that are provided by state corporations, the shareholders in those state corporations, the relationship between the institutions and those shareholders, issues of sustainability, like I've said, profit. Profit is not making money. The return, that's just return on investment. If you are an entity that provides services, still you make profit through provision of services, timely, efficient services. That's profit, and then plan it. We are encouraging all our state corporations to make sure that they leverage the virtual space that has made indeed the globe to become a village for each and every institution. Issues of audit. Audit previously was very weak in our state corporations. Today, we have made it mandatory that the role of internal audit is very clear. There was previously a perception that internal audit existed to give assurance to the CEO, which made internal control to be non-existent. Because the reason we have internal audit, especially the internal audit framework, is to assure the manager of state corporations. The manager is the board. And that's very clear even under the Companies Act. The shareholders appoint the board, they elect the members of a board, the directors, to manage the entity. And therefore, it is there that the internal control mechanism is supposed to give assurance. But previously, the internal audit mechanisms had been emasculated and made organs of the CEOs. And they were therefore available to provide assurance to the CEO, yet they are the auditors who are supposed to audit the auditee, who is the CEO. So we have now made it very clear that that is a mechanism of the board, a tool of the board to make sure that the CEOs are made to account, and assurance is given to the boards on how the CEOs are managing the institutions. The whistleblower, whistleblowing is provided for even in the Constitution. But I'm telling you, in most of our state corporations, if you are a whistleblower, you are dead. So we have made sure that we institutionalize the mechanism of whistleblowing in state corporation, and that mechanism is supposed to be seen to exist and is assured persons have the free will to blow the whistle, and the boards are required to institutionalize that mechanism. So that is now there in our state corporations. Companies, secretarial services, that was extremely weak, because most of the state corporations were created at a time where it was a requirement that the CEO should still serve as the secretary to the board. Now, most of the CEOs have no inkling on company secretarial practice and law. So you find an engineer who is a very good CEO, but who can not differentiate between 1 comma, 2 commas, a full stop, and anything. So they can place a full stop anywhere within a sentence in the minutes. And that becomes a problem, because it's a science. Company secretarial practice is a science. So there are persons who have gone to school to study that. But you see, in most state corporations, it was the CEOs who were the secretary. So the beauty with the Mwongozo, it provided for corporate secretariat service, irrespective of whether the law requires the CEO to be the secretary. So you go to our universities, for example, the Universities Act has stated explicitly that the Vice Chancellor shall be the secretary to the council. Now, does Mwongozo provision then conflict with that? No. We have told the universities, yes, you remain the secretary to the council, but you have a corporation secretary to professionalize the services that you provide to the council. And it's working very well. So through Mwongozo, therefore, there is no hurry to change the law, because you see, wisdom of lawmaking is parliament. If today you go to parliament to change any statute and provide for the powers of the CEO, not to include serving as a secretary, it may take years. So we are saying, let that process proceed. But we have a corporation secretary in the structures. Now that is working wonders in our state corporations. Minutes are not being, previously you would find a CEO doctoring minutes. So we have told the persons now there, the corporation secretaries, in case there is any report on minutes being adulterated, then the corporation secretary, who is a professional, we have required that they have to be members of the Institute of Certified Secretaries in good standing. So if minutes are reported to be adulterated, now the professional is dealt with in accordance with the law. So these are very great achievements that Mwongozo has put on the table. Succession planning, we require now succession plans in SCAC from state corporations. We are reviewing the strategic plans to make sure that there is a deliberate commitment by the board to do HR planning, so that at the end of every year, apart from having the staff establishments approved and so on, they do HR planning so that they are able to resource areas that are weak and make sure that there's proper succession as required under Mwongozo. Capacity building, induction of boards, we do that. We are trying to make sure this Mwongozo was actually developed through the partnership of SCAC and the Institute of Certified Secretaries. So, in terms of induction capacity building on Mwongozo, we work very closely with the Institute of Certified Secretaries. But we are trying to find space also for IOD. These two institutions for us are very critical, and we want them to work together because IOD, once you have a professional body for board members who are also able to check the conduct and build capacity and networking, that's extremely critical. So although we have not worked with IOD directly in capacity building, we think it's a very critical partner, and we are trying to find a mechanism through which we can mainstream IOD in the capacity building process and plans of our boards. Now, very critical, is it just a code that has no relationship with service delivery? I want to say that Mwongozo requires that boards should have a mechanism or a tool of measuring performance. And therefore, we have created for the board, we do board evaluation as provided for in Mwongozo, but also we want to remain accountable for the stewardship and governance of the agency and also service delivery. So what have we done? Performance contracting is, by the way, a Kenyan innovation, because globally, when we were introducing performance contracting, that time I was not in SCAC, we introduced performance contracting in the Inspectorate of State Corporations. I was an inspector of state corporations that time in 2004, and we did the first pilot in 15 state corporations in 2004. What we were told even by World Bank was that performance contracting cannot work. So people went for balanced scorecard and all that, but for us in Kenya, we deliberately went for performance contracting because there are certain tenets in PCs which you don't find in the balanced scorecard. And therefore, this is what has brought great change in Kenya, and Mwongozo drives all state corporations to make sure that they are on performance contracts. This year, the guidelines are out, and we want all state corporations by the 15th of July to have executed performance contract to make sure that boards are held accountable for outcomes, not just outputs, outcomes which impact our people. Another one is Huduma. Now, Huduma is one aspect. If you go to Huduma Kenya, you'll be shocked. All services in the country, you are to go and queue in places for services. With the Huduma Kenya platform, number one, it provided decency in terms of how our people are served. You go to Huduma and you are served. In fact, there's a lot of stuff, but just go and I demonstrate some of the ones that I have on the next slide. Now, if you go to the Huduma centers, we have the Huduma centers where we have taken, we are requiring all state corporations to take the services there. There is Huduma Mashinani, there are Huduma kiosks everywhere, and we are telling our state corporations leverage that platform in terms of delivery of services. What Mwongozo expects and what is at Huduma is accessible services, available services, acceptable services, and the standards have to be the same across the country. And the services in Huduma should be 24/7, 7 days a week, 24 hours of the day. And you can see if you go to most Huduma centers, you find this photo not captured, but the way people are served. And if you go to the Huduma Center headquarters, there is a performance dashboard where you can monitor. If you go there in the center and you want to see a person came to Huduma in Turkana, what time did that person come in? At what point was the person served? Was the person welcomed? Did the person sit? We don't expect in Huduma anybody to queue to be served while standing. So we have provided decency in terms of how people should be served, and we are taking services to Huduma. So there is that linkage between the Mwongozo expectations and actual service delivery by our state corporations that are required to provide services. The weakest link in Mwongozo is the model. Mwongozo is modeled on comply or explain, which means the recognition at the time that Mr. Nelson Kuri and team were coming up with this, the recognition was that we are at different levels as a people and in terms of our state corporations, in terms of what we need to do. Therefore, some state corporations may not be able to comply because of certain deficiencies within the institution. Therefore, where a requirement is in Mwongozo for you to comply and you don't comply, the model we adopted is comply or explain. So you explain. Now, very many state corporations are explaining every year why they cannot comply. And that is the weakness we have. So we are quickly reviewing Mwongozo so that we adopt the different model, like the King for now. I think their model is comply or else, if you, especially the corporates. So we want to have the Mwongozo 2, which will require that you either comply or ship out, because we cannot. We are very much cognizant of where we are. From 2015, we are doing 8 years, and we are sure that all state corporations can comply with the provisions in Mwongozo. So that's where we are headed. And one of the things we are doing now for state corporations that are commercial, we are saying they have to compete. The issue of government subsidy. If we go to countries, Nelson can, I think you can remember, we visited some countries before even 2013. And in countries like in the Far East, if you go to Singapore, which is billed to be the best of the countries in managing SOEs, Singapore is better than any other country. You go even to China with very many thousands. In China, anything you see, even a shop, a pharmacy is a state corporation, and they're doing very well. In those countries, one thing we learned, especially in Singapore, is that when a state corporation begins to show signs of sickness, they provide euthanasia. You should die very quickly because it's an indication that your time is up. But for us in Kenya, when you show as a state corporation an indication of sickness, we provide pillars of support and subsidies and subvention to make sure you don't die. If KBC was to say that we shall keep it alive. Now, we are through Mwongozo and the issue of sustainability. We are saying, for example, the commercial state farms, especially those ones. If you are not able to swim, you are not able to get to the depth, to the deep waters and swim with the sharks, either swim or sink, you will find it there, very specific. In Singapore, and I don't know if the statistics have changed in 2013, in Singapore, state-owned enterprises, which are government investments, and even for us they are government investments, the return, the check to the treasury in that country from government investments accounts for 71.3% of the budget. They service their budget 71.3% from government investments. What is the case in Kenya? 2021-2022, the budget of 2021-2022, government investments, what they brought their check to the national treasury accounted for 0.3% of the budget. So where do you service the budget from? Taxes. Na Wakenya wanasema punda amechoka. Atachoka kabisa. Literally, it's like we are servicing the budget in entirety from taxpayers. When in other countries, it's the reverse. So that is a move. We are on it. We are not there. but we are on it. Okay? We are requiring boards, if you go to Mwongozo, to be the visionary. And the best site, when you talk of animals that have the best vision, in my view, it is the fish. Those things can move at very high speed. They are able to sight anything that is edible and which they should reach for. And that's what the boards should be. Very visionary, out there looking for opportunities and so on. But just like the fish, one thing that my dad taught me, and I refused to eat fish when I was young, because whenever my brothers had problems with their children, and they come to complain to my father, I was the last born, my father will always remind them, remember, a fish rots from the head. And my brother would run away very quickly. And that's what happens. Even to the boards. Most of the boards, Mwongozo has only been effective where the boards are as visionary as a fish can be. But where the board being the head is dead, then Mwongozo has been of no value even to those state corporations. That's my experience. Thank you. Yes, some question? All right.
I just want to request you to say something about something I think is important, but you didn't mention about it, and which I know you're very passionate about, and that's about board evaluation. Just tell us, how has board evaluation in state corporations helped in terms of improving the governance standards in that area, and how is it equally important even in the private sector? Thank you.
Board evaluation. It is one of the requirements in Mwongozo that boards should subject themselves to evaluation every year. Now, we started this way back, and as required in Mwongozo, the board is evaluated corporately as a board by the entirety of the board. Members, the chair, the board members, the CEO, that is the board membership. And then they evaluate the chairperson. The entire board evaluates the chairperson, including the chairperson evaluating oneself. The CEO is evaluated by everybody, and the CEO also evaluates oneself, and then the same to each individual members. We did that very effectively until 2021. One of the successes is that now the renewal of contracts of board members and CEO became somehow predictable, because in the case of CEOs, there is no arbitrariness in appointment and renewal. If you are a CEO, you are only, you expect your contract to be renewed as legitimate expectation. It's a legitimate expectation. Where we have had some boards try at the tail end, because the requirement is when you come to the third year, or at the universities in the fifth year, you consider the performance cumulatively. Now, some boards, the CEO will behave very well and perform very well. First year, we have had the most interesting scenario in universities. Vice chancellors are appointed for 5 years. First year, over 80%. Second year, even over 90%. Third year, 40%. When it comes to the year of renewal of contract, 30%. So, they didn't know that SCAC has the card. So, like, I can tell you, one of the universities, University of Eldoret, the vice chancellor was evaluated at 23%. Yet, the 4 years she had done over 80%. So what happens? The board says, now we are not renewing. The ministry comes to SCAC, hey, advice. We say, even though we take the performance of the fifth year to be 23%, we want to accumulate the performance and get an average. And she gets 79. And she's given another contract and the board goes home. Because that's how it happened in that university. So we are creating objectivity in how we manage the institutions. First, for the CEOs, there is predictability in renewal of contract as long as you are performed. For the board members, again, the same thing. Most of the board members now, their renewal have something. As to whether the evaluation is objective, I can't assure you. Because for the board members, what we have realized is that there's a guy who thinks, you look me, I look you. So board members decide to discuss among themselves, say, now our contract is coming to an end. And this will be. So let's not go there about objectivity, but at least there is a tool that assures of some objective criteria to be referred to while determining renewal of contract. 2021, we said, now, why can't we have all the board organs evaluated, corporation secretaries? Why can't we attempt? So last year, corporation secretaries were now available on that platform. It's an online platform, and they evaluate themselves, and they are evaluated by the rest of the membership. Very successful. So last year, we have the results of evaluation for all corporation secretaries. Very useful indeed. After that success, we said, why can't we do another board organ? The internal auditor who gives assurance to the board. So the rollout for this year, which is ending 30th June, we are doing now internal auditors. They are also being evaluated. And let me tell you, if you came to SCAC, that's how you can know we are impacting. Right now, we have one of the countries in West Africa. They are there just to see how we did the one for corporation secretaries. And Mwongozo, by the way, in one of the East African countries, they picked the code plus the name. They did not know what Mwongozo is. Mwongozo is the Swahili word. And Mwongozo has trended and influenced that. And we are giving support. So what we are doing in our private sector in Kenya, I was talking to the CEO of the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. And we asked him, do we have any private sector board which assesses the internal auditor? And the only case after everything he found was Safaricom. But in Safaricom, they do it wrongly, because it is the board chair and the CEO who evaluate the internal auditor. The CEO is audited by the auditor. How do you make him to evaluate? So we have discounted that. Ours is clean. The board members who interact with the internal auditor, especially the audit committee. And we want to test and see. So we are refining everything every day to make sure that board evaluation is effective. And the results we have for board evaluation are very interesting. So many people are coming to learn about it. We think it's a success, with its own pitfalls. Private sector, we have some insurance companies, private sector, which have come, SCAC has done for them. Very, very good results there, and they are improving, because the entire purpose of board evaluation is to improve the performance of the board and the membership. The issue of, are we walking the talk when we talk about the quality of members in our boards? I was asked this question the other day, actually, in a board induction in Naivasha. And a person stood up and said, almost all boards now, there are some boards when you go there, the prefix before the name is honorable. Entire board, honorable. Either ex-MCA or ex-MP or ex-senator. Is that good business? According to me, very good business. Why do I say that? When Mwongozo has put the qualifications, at least you should be a degree holder, at least. The days when people used to come and press the finger in the boardroom, gone. So now we have achieved that quite somehow. So if those people are MPs and is there a problem? According to me, the board should relate policy to ground economy nagani. Now these guys, why they are good, they know ground economy nagani. Then they bring how the ground is to influence policy in the boardroom. I don't see any problem. The problem is political patronage, where now the board and the head of public service, we had a meeting with all CEOs of state corporations and chairpersons. Are there any at the KSG? Anybody was at Kenya School of Government? Last month, on 2nd of June, we had a meeting with all chairpersons and CEOs. And the head of public service, myself, we made it very clear. The chairpersons of the board, you are not going to cross this line. There are some who had even gone and replaced the CEO, said, this is the office I want. This is, and some were coming to the office daily. And after that meeting, and we, the head of public service issued a circular. The chairpersons and members, you are not executive. This is your role. You are the managers of these entities, but you don't cross the line. This is what you're supposed to do, and boards were required to discuss that circular and confirm that they have discussed. So we now, we get some board persons who have never sat in an executive. You have never been employed. Your work was politics. The first job was MCA. So we can't blame them. It is our duty now to turn them from the baraza to the boardroom now, and that's what we are doing. So Mongoza has not failed on that front. We still have the right persons, and if they are not performing, it is CAC. We have to turn them into now managers, and we are trying to do that. And we ask IOD to also work with us in doing that. Thank you.